Well, welcome to the 700 Club, and thanks so much for joining with us. Nuclear facilities, weapons factories, missile and drone launch sites. These are just some of the targets in Iran that Israel might hit in the coming days.
The Biden administration continues to warn Israel against escalating the conflict. To ease the tension, they're now proposing greater economic sanctions on Tehran. Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu explained to young military recruits why Israel must respond to Iran's attack.
Iran stands behind Hamas, behind Hezbollah, behind others. But we're determined to win there and defend ourselves in all arenas.
Analysts speculate Israel could hit Iranian nuclear facilities or factories and launch sites that made the drone and missile attack possible.
Firing 110 ballistic missiles directly to Israel will not get scot-free. We will respond in our time, in our place, in the way that we will choose.
On Tuesday, the IDF displayed one of the more than 100 ballistic missiles fired at Israel.
These ballistic missiles are ones that has 500 kilos of explosives in the warhead. We're talking about over 110 ballistic missiles coming from Iran, aiming towards Israel. These are 60 tons of explosives directly to Israel.
On the diplomatic front, the U.S. continues to pressure Israel against a retaliatory strike and has announced it's ready to apply economic sanctions against Iran's missile and drone program. Critics point out that the Biden administration has waived such sanctions in the past.
We lifted or waived the sanctions that we had, this administration, on the drones and the missiles and on the energy. This is giving them $100 billion in cash to fund their terror operations. And that's why we're seeing this.
Senior policy advisor for the U.S.-Israel Education Association, Ari Sacher, says most citizens want to send Iran a message.
Israelis, I believe, think that we need to return fire. Iran cannot be let off with a tongue lashing for what they did. There must be a price for impinging upon the security of a sovereign nation.
Sacher believes, like many here in Israel, that divine intervention was at work during the attack.
I have an axiomatic belief in the existence of a God who pays attention and who cares, especially about what goes on in Israel. And everything I see reinforces that belief. So when I see 99% of rockets that are fired at Israel, of threats, missiles, cruise missiles that are fired at Israel being shot down, I wake up the next morning and I thank God for it.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Well, we thank God for it as well. When you look at the stats, the companies that make these missile defense systems, they say it's only good against 90% of them. And so you look at that and look at, well, 99% were intercepted. You just go, wow, these are amazing stats. And you take a step back and go, but God, he seems to have his hand in these affairs. I hope he has a hand in our administration, and I hope it gives them unusual wisdom for these days. I've been praying for unusual wisdom for the leadership of Israel, and that they would have unusual unity as well. They seem to be divided, and now more than ever, there needs to be unity. But within our administration, can we please give up the failed policy that we've had for Iran since the Obama administration, where somehow we think through negotiation and through that kind of peace strategy, they're going to stop their ideology of hate. It's quite clear they're not going to. How many times do they need to attack international shipping? How many times do they need to attack the refineries in Saudi Arabia? How many times do they need to attack our military forces in Iraq and in Syria? How many times do they need to attack Israel before we wake up to, well, they're the real threat in the Middle East? It's not the Iranian people. They've been protesting against their own government for some time. Their own government, in response, lynches them in the public square. And if you're a woman and you're wearing your scarf wrong, you're going to be beaten to death very publicly. You look at this kind of atrocious action, how in the world could we ever release money to them? How could we ever say, well, it's okay for you to export your drone and missile technology? It's absolutely insane to think that somehow or other they're going to come to a peace table and treat you fairly at that table. They're not going to do it. Of all times in history, now's the time to be really tough.